President.
The Senator from Alaska.
Well, Mr. President, I thank my colleague, the chairman of the Energy Committee, for his comments on not only this very important legislation, but his leadership on energy issues as we have worked together on the Energy Committee, a committee that I know you enjoyed your time on, Mr. President, recognizing that there is so much that we can be doing as a nation on a bipartisan basis to really make a difference within our communities, across our regions, not only for the economy and jobs, but really to make a difference globally in terms of how we handle our energy and our energy resources. We talk a lot about the all-of-the-above strategy, and perhaps that has different interpretations depending on what part of the country you're from. But one of the slogans that was going around just a few years back was produce more, use less. Well, now, Mr. President, we are talking about the use less side of that ledger. Equally important. I come from a producing state, but let me tell you, when you come from a state where our energy costs are some of the highest in the nation, if not the highest in the nation, we're also pretty good and wise about how we use less. So I am very, very pleased that we are at this point today where we are finally taking up this energy efficiency bill. The chairman has mentioned that it has been a long time since we have seen energy legislation debated here on the floor. And I do find it troubling that we have gone so long without meaningful and sustained debate about energy policy. Each year, our committee sends dozens of bills to the floor with our signature stamp of bipartisan approval, which I think is key. And yet for years, we have kind of seen the bills come to the floor, and that's been the end of the road for those particular efforts. While a small number of our public lands bills are able to pass through by unanimous consent, those that are related to energy, those that often need a little more work to pass this chamber, are virtually never brought up for further consideration. Now, I do understand that we've got all kinds of pressing matters in front of us. Obviously, the debate over the Syria resolution, clearly one of them. The continuing resolution that we will have in front of us as we work to fund the government, critically important. If we do reach agreement on how we should proceed to either of these measures, I will certainly be the first to agree that they need to be brought forward for debate. But when we have finished those, I am hopeful that we will return, if we have not yet concluded, that we will return to energy legislation because it has been too long neglected in this chamber. I came to the position as ranking member of the Energy Committee back in 2009, and I was very, very optimistic about what we would accomplish in this area. All of those of us on the committee had worked to deliver three major energy bills during the preceding years that I'd been on the committee. We had the Energy Policy Act of 2005, we had the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act of 2006, we had the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. All of them were partially or entirely written by our committee. They all received strong support in this chamber, and they all eventually became law. So fast forward to where we are today. Our floor debate in 2007 remains the last time that the Senate truly engaged on energy policy. And in the interim, about the best that we've seen are some amendments here and there along the process, or perhaps dueling side-by-sides that are inevitably voted down. But the lack of action on energy legislation is not because we have abandoned a bipartisan approach in committee. It is not because we have perhaps run out of good ideas. And it is certainly not because we are somehow unable or unwilling to report legislation to the full Senate. We reported a comprehensive bill back in 2009 that sat on the calendar untouched untouched for 17 months. We unanimously reported a bill to help prevent another offshore spill in 2010. That, too, was ignored. The reality is that we have one of the most bipartisan and active committees in the Senate. But unfortunately, we're almost regularly in a situation where we're not provided the floor time needed to complete our work. Now, I'm not complaining here, I'm just pointing out some facts here. But the chairman noted that there has been this pent-up demand, this frustration about not only where we are in the process, but the opportunities that are lost. When you think about the changing dynamics in this country since 2009, think about what has changed in the energy sector during that course, and the fact that we have not addressed real fulsome energy legislation is really quite telling. But I am hopeful that the Senate is now finally on the verge of reversing its unfortunate approach to energy policy. As the chairman has noted, we have already ordered more than 50 bills to be reported to the Senate this year alone. Today, as we begin debate on the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act, I don't even know why we're calling it that. We just call it Shaheen-Portman around here, and the work that the authors of this legislation have done, I certainly applaud. But we are here at this point because of the very concerted efforts of the authors of this bill, Senator Portman, Senator Shaheen, their great bipartisan work, months and months of negotiation, months of waiting. So to be here today to stand in support of this bill is wonderful. I have spent some time on this floor talking about an energy blueprint that I had crafted back at the beginning of the year, Energy 2020, and I say this is 115 pages of energy policy, but it really can be summed up in one bumper sticker, and it just says energy is good. And so the fact that we're here on the floor talking about energy efficiency, I think, is absolutely key. When I mention that 2020 blueprint, in that, I make the point, I make the push that we need to strive to make our energy more abundant, more affordable, clean, diverse, and secure. And while we often focus on the more obvious efforts to advance energy policy, in my case, more production on federal lands, passage of approval of the Keystone XL pipeline, the restoration of some real balance in new regulations, and I think a much greater focus on innovation. It is also critically important that we look to the efficiency side. It must be a larger part of our energy debate. It deserves to be a larger part of our nation's energy policy. And the reasons why, there's no great mystery here. Efficiency is good for the economy and for our environment. It enables us to waste less and use our resources more wisely. Great conservative principles there. At the same time, it can help create jobs and deliver lasting financial benefits. Study after study, and the chairman has pointed some of those out, study after study has shown that we could save billions of dollars every year through reasonable efficiency improvements, whether through small appliances, large buildings, or someplace in between there. These potential savings cannot be overlooked at a time when we see so many of our families and businesses that are struggling to make ends meet. Debt is escalating. The price of energy remains well above what most of us want it to be. So as policymakers, I can't think of efficiency as just an energy issue alone. It's also a bottom line issue that really affects every one of us and every one of our constituents back home. Now, while we can all agree on the importance of efficiency, we can also agree that there's a legitimate debate over the federal government's role in this area. In my judgment, that role should be limited and the cost associated with it should be minimal. The federal government must itself be efficient as it pursues efficiency. And I think that these are areas that we can really work to enhance. We cannot simply lavish subsidies, pass bill after bill, or impose mandate after mandate and suggest that that is somehow our pursuit of a greater good. Instead, I think that the federal government should strive to fulfill three pretty distinct roles. It can act as a facilitator of information that consumers and businesses need to make sound decisions. It can serve as a breaker of barriers that discourage or prevent rational efficiency improvements from being made. And as the largest consumer of energy in our country, it can lead by example by taking steps to reduce its own energy usage. Those are the criteria by which we can evaluate whether the federal government is on the right track on energy efficiency, and also the criteria by which we can judge whether or not this particular bill, the Shaheen-Portman bill, would improve our current policies. So let me just move to the bill for a moment and explain why I support it. First, the scope. The scope is both limited and, I think, appropriate. It does not contain new mandates for the private sector, not for buildings, not for appliances, not for anything. The provision on building codes is a good example of what the bill does and does not do. Because I would not be supporting a provision if it required the mandatory adoption of those codes. But this bill is voluntary, with the federal government stepping in to help facilitate new models that others can choose to follow. Second point here is the costs. We're all focusing on costs nowadays. The costs of this bill are fully offset. It contains no direct spending. The only provision that received a score from the Congressional Budget Office has been dropped. A grants program that passed our committee has now been dropped as well. Some of these things I think we look at and we say we would rather that they had been in there, but we're trying to deal with the cost side. And I appreciate both Senators Shaheen and Portman for working with us on that. The authorizations that remain in the bill have been fully offset by cutting a provision from the 2007 energy bill. Any federal dollars that are ultimately spent on this legislation will have to be secured through a future appropriations process within the context of our larger debate about the overall federal budget. And the third point here is I support this bill because of the process that was followed to bring it to this point. And again, I want to give the chairman credit and clearly Senators Shaheen and Portman. But it was bipartisan from the get-go. The senator from New Hampshire got together with the senator from Ohio to really lead its development. And I can remember the conversation years ago about, he said, I'm working on this. And it was long before there was any draft, but just working through in just kind of the good old-fashioned roll up your sleeves, let's work on doing good things in energy policy when it comes to efficiency. So I give full credit. Our committee held a hearing on this bill. We had testimony from Department of Energy and other experts. We moved through to a markup. Oh my goodness, this could be considered regular order here. We improved the bill in the markup there. We reported it favorably by a vote of 19-3. Possible amendments have been worked on by members and staff alike over these past several months. I think there are many good amendments that I think we all assume will easily win passage. And at the same time, the bill's sponsors have continued to work to refine and improve the legislation leading to the product that we have before us today. So on scope and substance, on cost and on process, this bill has been a good example. This has been an example of what regular order, working as usual, showing how the Senate really can work, showing the Senate at its best. The only real trouble we've encountered is securing the floor time necessary to try and secure its passage. So here we are. Here we are. And it is my hope, Mr. President, that with the efforts of the sponsors of this bill, with the efforts of the chairman of the Energy Committee, continuing to push to build good things rather than trying to blow things up, we will have an opportunity to see this measure enacted into law. As I mentioned, we don't have an opportunity here on the floor of the United States Senate to debate energy as often as I would like to. By the looks of what we have pending in front of us, we recognize that there may be interruptions. It is my hope that we can move quickly, take up many of these bipartisan amendments that Chairman Wyden has mentioned. Let's make the most of the opportunity that we have before us now. Let's weigh the federal government's proper role in efficiency. Let's make sure that this bill reflects all of that. Let's start working through the amendments that have been filed and move forward with a process that will yield good policy for this country. Again, I thank the sponsors for their yeoman's work in getting us to this point, and I look forward to the discussion and the debate that we will have in the days ahead. And with that, Mr. President, I will yield the floor. I know that Senator Shaheen, with all the work that she's put into this, is anxious to finally be discussing her bill on the floor of the Senate chamber. I yield the floor.